We're done. Well, let me call you back here in a bit. I finally got a computer problem worked out. Or, oh, shoot. Okay. Well, no problem. I'll talk to you later. Yep. Night, night. Howdy, y'all. I didn't know if I'd be able to get this live stream to work. That was kind of a surprise. So sorry I was on the phone there. Sorry to the person I was on the phone with. I had to go. But I'm glad that this works because I've tried for like 2 weeks and I could never get on live stream anymore. So today in the Orthodox world is Forgiveness Sunday. Forgive me, brothers and sisters, because I'm a sinner. Forgive my sins. Have mercy on me. I'm truly sorry for all my sins, whether in thought, word, or deed. I love you all, and I hope everyone's doing good tonight. Life is a struggle. The car was trying to act up on me again today. It's just so expensive. And I went out in the woods earlier between church services and prayed to God. Repented for my sins. Asked him for forgiveness and mercy. I'm trying to make it through this life. And it's hard when you're by yourself. I've got no family up here. The friends I have at church are great. I'm so thankful for them. Of course, me being a guy with my problems, I'm so lucky. I've been doing caretaking a little bit on the side and seeing some of the issues that other people are dealing with. And it makes mine not seem as bad. I still struggle against the evil one. I struggle against sin. And that's something that I'm going to have to struggle with my entire life. It's something we all struggle with our entire lives. And that's why it's so important to be in the church and to have good friends. And don't lead your friends into things that are immoral and bad, like sports and immoral music. Things of the world. We shouldn't be tempting our brothers and sisters to be a part of these things. They're not good for our souls. They're not good for us in any way. They distract us from growing. We're here to grow into better beings. We're not here to live for the flesh, even though we are made of flesh. The world is the general name for all the passions. When we wish to call the passions by a common name, we call them the world. But when we wish to distinguish them by their special names, we call them the passions. The passions are the following: love of riches, desire for possessions, bodily pleasure from which comes sexual passion, love of honor which gives rise to envy, lust for power, arrogance, and pride of position. The craving to adorn oneself with luxurious clothes and vain ornaments. The itch for human glory, which is a source of rancor and resentment and physical fear. Where these passions cease to be active, there the world is dead. Someone has said of the saints that while alive they were dead, for though living in the flesh they did not live for the flesh. See for which of these passions you are alive, then you will know how far you are alive to the world and how far you are dead to it. St. Isaac the Syrian, 7th century. I have some more Death to the World magazines coming. We'll do some more readings out of those soon. These will be ones that no one's been able to get their hands on in a long time. And I'm really excited about that. They should be here in a few days, hopefully by the end of the week. Thinking about trying to be a better person and trying to overcome all these things that I'm fighting against sometimes seems like so overwhelming for me. I was talking to another guy that was younger than me at church today. He was talking about how he'd been a bad person and how he got beyond the breaking point before he finally was able to get into the church and go to the church. I said I was exactly the same way. I'm glad he's doing it years and years ahead of me. This world we've allowed the system to create for all of us is so wrong. It's so perverse and it's so polluted. It's so absolutely evil. I don't know how anyone can tell us with a straight face that this is the best nation on the planet. It certainly is not. Just because we have the most power doesn't make it the best nation. Just because we have so-called freedoms that we think we have that we don't have doesn't make it the best nation. Just because we can destroy other people and other nations doesn't make this the greatest nation. The only thing that could have ever made America great was God. And if we look at our society now, we can see that we've certainly turned our backs on God. We've become a godless nation full of prideful people, full of arrogance and greed and violence, full of perversion and depravity. By no means is this the greatest nation on earth. There are other much smaller nations and communities where they still believe in God, where they still try to do good, where they don't allow children to be brainwashed in schools, where they don't show perversion on television nonstop. I can't remember how exactly how many nations there are in the world. There's almost, I want to say, there's quite a few. There's more than a couple hundred for sure. The only thing that could ever make America great again is God. It isn't a politician. It isn't a system. It's God. God is the only thing that will make America great. But there's all kinds of people that make America not great. When people are so full of pride and they're so full of violence and they're allowing people to kill other people, to slay the innocent, that's not good. That's indecent, immoral, and evil. When we're the biggest spender on killing in the entire world, there's something wrong with that. We spend more on killing people than saving life. We let our veterans die in the streets. We allow people to have homeless camps in every large city in our country, full of people openly doing drugs, committing rapes and murders on the streets. That's not a great country. That's a country with messed up priorities. That's a country with the priorities of evil. And it's shameful and it's sad and it's wrong. When we have a nation where in the 1990s it's gone from 6,000 people a year taking their own life because they don't feel like they can live on this planet and in this country anymore because it's become too painful and too hard. And it's jumped up to over 49,000 people a year in the year 2022 in the US alone that leave this world because they can't live here in this country anymore. There's something wrong. There's something missing. And what's missing is God. What's missing is love. What's missing is compassion. When we look at the prices of having a home, and we see that there's no way that the youth of today can ever afford to own a home, there's no way that the youth of today can afford to have an apartment by themselves. There's nowhere for them to go. There's nothing for them to do that will make enough money to satisfy the government's greed and the corporate lust for income. What are they supposed to do? Why would they not give up? Isn't it obvious? When you make things so hard that someone can't succeed, when you tell them there's no God, when you take away every shred of hope they have, when you give them a burden that they can't possibly carry, do you really wonder why they fail? Is our government and our politicians really so stupid? Are our community leaders really so stupid and ignorant that they can't understand reality, that they can't add the weight of the burden together with the subtracting of the hope and wonder why that's going to end up in failure? It's a shameful country that we've created for the children, these children that have to grow up in this dust bin, in this horrible cesspool that we've created. Can't help but to feel like giving up. And that's why so many every year do. And the numbers so rapidly increasing that nobody even wants to keep track of what it is now. No one wants to report on that statistic. They're trying to keep it suppressed so that people don't know. And it's beginning to happen in other countries that are trying to support our materialism and our greed and our lust for products. Everybody's trying to destroy themselves. It's a race to the bottom, trying to see how much they can force their citizens to do before their citizens just decide that's enough, it's too much, and I can't live anymore. I'd rather leave this planet for an uncertain afterlife than to stay here and toil in this cesspool. And I'm just putting it nicely. And that's as nice as I can put it. We need God in this country again. Prison, the exalted spiritual academy. This is a fitting story because America is the new prison. And now that the walls are going up even tighter, America used to be the prison without walls. Now it's the prison with walls. The 16 years of living hand in hand with death in prisons and labor camps, such as those in Sukivia, Aoud, Sigat, Baya, Spree, Bitesti, Jilva, Perivprava, and Danube Black Sea Canal, had been for Father Justin and many others a unique spiritual academy. Reflecting on his prison years, Father Justin said, "There couldn't have been a more profitable place for living an authentic monastic life as there. In prison, I knew meekness, true humility, and the bodily detachment that can be attained only when you're aware that there's no escape. You would daily see your life drawing to an end, and at the moment of death, prison forced you to learn asceticism, fasting, and prayer, as well as communion with and love for your neighbor. There they experienced God's constant presence in their midst. God was closer to us in prison than other situations. We saw his signs and miracles all the time. In prison, prayer seemed to receive a quicker answer. God was there with us. God was chased into prison by an institutional society that intended to exist without God. That Father Justin greatly benefited from his time in prison can be seen from his own words. All that spiritual preparation made me earnestly determine the rule of my monastic life, so that we, Father Justin and his brotherhood, might be a true light in union with and oneness against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Ephesians 6:12. As the holy apostle Paul says, Father Justin had been called to be a priest, a father for those cast into the dark communist prisons. You could say just as easily today, the dark capitalist prison of America, and the governing regime could not make him deny his calling. He decided to keep silent and descend into the depths of humility and suffering for his brothers, especially the ill. He began to hear their confessions, first of those in his own cell, mostly during the fasting periods. Then he started to confess the people in other cells using Morse code, since everyone knew how to communicate by tapping on the wall. We couldn't talk with ease, especially when a conversation would be stirred up by informers who would record it and then use it against you. Nothing could stop him from laboring for the salvation of others. Father Justin felt responsible for helping them to transfigure their spiritual lives. He said that this became the fundamental joy of my life. Personally, I didn't feel physical pain anymore. I was living according to my own vocation. Ban was more joyful than I'd ever been when I was free in the world. This was also because our spiritual life deepened much more during imprisonment. Those were extraordinary and unique days of sacrifice and renunciation. It was painful to see a man dying before your eyes. This was real suffering. Those were days of light and joy, and life was abundant in those moments. The prison was the best place for religious education. The prisons formed character and taught people ethics. And that's exactly what's happening in the capitalist prison of the United States of America. It's become so depraved, so immoral, so evil, and full of darkness that the youth of today are starting to resist. They're starting to seek truth. They want to find God. They're turning towards religion, and they're turning towards orthodoxy. The cesspool of America has caused people such extreme pain in their life, such extreme suffering, that the only outlet for them that they can see is God. And maybe this is what it had to come to. I think the reawakening is starting. People have become so tired of the sick, perverted, evil government of the United States that they're finally seeking God. The prisons were true universities of life. They enabled the prisoners to learn a great deal from each other in different disciplines, especially theology. As Father Justin recalled, we all learned from each other. That was how we kept the flame of life burning. That was how we stayed alive. We believed wholeheartedly that it was absolutely wrong not to resist together, not to fulfill our duty, a sacrificial one. Their youth, zeal, prayer, and love for God and neighbor helped the prisoners survive the dreadful circumstances they found themselves in. In the words of Father Justin, the prison cell was my Kellyan, in which I was able to conduct my monastic rule in stillness. In a cell containing 5 to 6 people, prayer went on without ceasing. We recited prayers and akathis we knew by heart. We memorized one gospel in a week and knew it as well as we knew the Lord's Prayer. Since the books were totally forbidden in prison, some were smuggled in, hidden in the seams of coats, reading and learning a few pages of a chapter at a time while tucking the book under a blanket so the guards would not notice anything during their rounds, which took place every 10 minutes, gave the prisoners unspeakable nourishment, strength, patience, steadfastness, and endurance. Thus they knew the New Testament, the Psalter, and even the Philokalia by heart, and were able to remain human, to be truly free even while behind bars. Fueled by love and the grace of the Holy Spirit, Father Justin would serve the divine liturgy on his own chest or on the chest of the gravely ill as often as he could. A small piece of bread weighing less than an ounce, which he could tuck into the seams of his coat, was enough to prepare Holy Communion for 100 people. When necessary, Holy Communion would be either hidden at a latrine or given in secret when someone passed by his cell. The hiding place would be communicated using Morse code. Physical suffering was not an obstacle in his continuous labor for others, as he recalled. For some time, I had suffered from hepatitis, and I ended up in the infirmary. I had consumed my last little particle of Holy Communion, and I didn't have even a single fragment left. Konstantin Serban, a 28-year-old man with a wife and 2 kids at home, was in the same cell with us. He was suffering from cirrhosis and was beginning to decompose. He screamed, moaned, and wept day in and day out. He hadn't received Holy Communion in 4 years. He was spiritually burdened. What could I do? I confessed him at night or early in the morning, between 4 and 5 a.m., for 5 minutes at a time. The guards would check on us through the peephole while making their rounds, peeking into each cell to see if you were on your knees or if you were trying to pray over someone. We were witnessing the degradation of our own bodies, the process of dying. There was a point when we could become unable to feel anything except our spine. There was a deep peace. Going beyond this point would make us expect death and prepare for it. Constantly living this reality and having it always before your eyes was a frightening thing. You could not be astonished when your colleague in the next bed didn't respond to your call. He could have reposed. Many deaths occurred that quickly. Due to the advanced level of starvation, our bodies began to swell all over our legs, fingers, and head. We wondered why we were becoming so fat. The doctors among us explained that when a body loses its normal ability to function, it is unable to eliminate the water retained in the tissues. If you pressed a spot on your skin with your finger, a hole would form and the skin couldn't recede. The state meant death was a matter of hours away. We were all very young, 22 to 35 years old. When you entered that state, there was a chance you would lose your self mastery and not know what you were saying or doing. So what I did do to commune in this time? So what did I do to commune in this in time? This young man with cirrhosis. I said to the others, "Boys, we have to ask to be seen by the doctor. Since we're so weak, we have the right to get some wine," and it was given to us. Then, in a corner out of sight, I served the divine liturgy alone with a small piece of bread I had and all the prayers I knew. This was how I served the divine liturgy whenever I could. Thus, I was able to give Holy Communion to that man who died 3 days later. Something similar happened in the infirmary at Gerla prison, where Father Justin served the liturgy on a dying man's body. As he recalled, I never served a liturgy wearing all my vestments and doing everything according to the Typicon with more fervent prayer than I served there on that body. I finished reading as much as I could from the Psalms and the prayers, and we communed the more gravely ill ones, holding a towel to their neck. The most gravely ill man was all puffed up due to his cirrhosis and died 2 hours later. The other 3 died that week. While serving, I truly felt the warmth, the fervor of the Spirit. There were many similar cases. People sacrificed themselves even there. Their sacrificial state surpassed the magnitude of their own suffering. If a sick man in your cell was in agony, living his last moments, you would give him 2 or 3 spoonfuls from your ration to get him back on his feet. There were healthy and strong men who would give up their food, as Father Justin often did, fasting for 2 or 3 days. Thus, they saved other people's lives. The prisons taught us one thing, that we're one in Christ. It didn't matter if you were an intellectual or a simple man. Rejecting the world and stepping towards Christ. In ancient times, the Eastern despots, especially in Persia, had two terrible, disgusting. Actually, I read this one not very long ago. I'm sorry, I want to read another something that you haven't heard for a little bit. This is from Metropolitan Saba. Our belief is that man is created in the image of God. This means that our belief is that man is created to be in communion and union with God. And if that he rejects this communion, he will not become a human being in the authentic understanding. Apart from God, a normal man cannot exist. The state of the man who has cut himself off from God is abnormal. Thus, the meaning of the state of our belief in the image is that God is the center of man's existence. In other words, the divine element is what defines our humanity. If we lose our connection with the divine, we lose our connection to the human as well. Metropolitan Saba. The Call. Below is the third recorded homily given in opposition to the law in a series of 7 homilies to the youth, delivered as Lenten meditations by Father George Calciu to the youth in Romania. Under communist rule in Romania, Father George was taken prisoner by the authorities for refusing to become a puppet of the government. He preached the truth openly to a society that was being contorted into a materialistic one, being stripped of all spiritual life. In the face of cruel imprisonment and unimaginable torture for which he suffered for many years, Father George delivered to the youth a series of homilies of consolation, leading them away from the pernicious lies of a totalitarian, materialistic society in order to find freedom in Christ, the God man who was outlawed. We, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. 2 Peter 3:13. Young man, I am speaking with you again today because I have chosen you from all those to whom I could be speaking, for you are most ready to hear the word of Christ. You are noble and pure. Atheist education has not yet managed to darken heaven within you. You still look upward. You can still hear calls from exalted places. There is no grounding the soaring of your spirit towards the heavenly spheres through the propagation of arbitrary concepts. The desire for heaven still exists within you. Materialism has not made you its prisoner. Thus I call you 7 times, young man. 7 are the praises of the day towards God. According to the psalmist, 7 times a day have I praised thee for the judgments of thy righteousness. Psalms 118, 164. Today we will speak of heaven and earth. I will not frighten you with colorful descriptions of the end of the world. We stand before death daily. In the presence, it's more suffocating than life itself, for it is more real than life. Death is our nightmare by day and by night. You live with death by your side, friend, and yet you have not grown accustomed to its presence because you are alive and authentic, more alive and real than you think. Heaven and earth, the concepts remind me of a poem I once heard, recited by the poet himself on the television. He held his right arm as he spoke. His face was a picture of forced inspiration, and his voice recited in a monotone. He was trying to induce some kind of trance among his hearers that they might imitate him. Each verse was supported by a chorus of children chanting an artificial litany spontaneously prescribed. Can you count us, heaven? 1, 2, 3, and so forth up to 10. It was a curse, a defiance thrown up at heaven. The poem was essentially saying that heaven might be able to count the poet and his companions 1, 2, 3, good and well, but it could not overcome them. That was the gist of it. He was an atheist poet, suited for the materialists. But to which heaven did he address himself? Was it to the regions made up to the successive strata of the atmosphere? If so, his monologue was senseless. The poet was obviously addressing someone who could hear and even count. At least that is what one surmises from the conviction with which he spoke. How strange. For it is not a matter of inventing a trivial personification for the sake of the poem's rhythm, but the poet himself actually believed in the depth of his being that his appeal or invocation was being heard and that it was an act of heroism. He addressed the metaphysical heaven which tortures him, diminishes him, and denies his affirmation. It is this heaven I want to talk to you about, my friend. In the beginning, God made the heaven and the earth. Genesis 1 1. He created a heaven and an earth, an immanent and a transcendent, a given material and an aspiration after perfection, a temporal space and a senseless, spaceless, timeless existence. From the moment of creation to the present, we keep within ourselves the nostalgic memory of our integration with God's heaven. We have never forgotten that there is a place in heaven to which we, or rather heaven with us, aspire. Tell me, young man, how much have you believed the statements which you have heard repeatedly to the point of obsession at school, on the radio, on television, in the newspapers, and at young people's meetings that say you descend from monkeys, and how you honored this revelation, and how honored this revelation has made you feel? Noam Chomsky has said that the most stupid human beings can learn to speak, but the most intelligent monkey has never reached such a height of achievement. You are heaven and earth, darkness and light, sin and grace. I know, friend, that you are tortured by questions concerning the meaning of your life in this world and on the purpose of the world in general. Do the ready made authoritarian statements in answer to your limited questions satisfy you? Namely, that heaven is fiction and matter is everything. It is matter speaking to you through your internal and external senses. Matter organized its own structure and evolution by certain laws of great complexity before even the slightest rudiment of the human brain was formed. Thus, once the higher brain of man appeared, the only method for matter to recognize itself, it could not recognize itself any longer. And from that time until now, human intelligence has been struggling in a sterile and vain effort to discover laws which he, matter, fixed in a period in which there was nothing but darkness and non consciousness. What do you think of this joke of non intelligence, which stuns all human intelligence, even that of the collective? Do you not see that the most elementary logic obliges you to admit the presence of an intelligent outside this world? But I call you to a much higher flight, to total abandonment, to an act of courage which defies reason. I call you to God, to the one that transcends the world, so that you might know an infinite heaven of spiritual joy, the heaven which you presently grope for in your personal hell, and which you seek even whilst in a state of non deliberative revolt. This heaven, with its divine hierarchy and its divine light gradually descending only to return to its source, which is God, does not count us in twos or fives or tens. For my friend, you are not a piece in a machine which drives you around. In the eyes of heaven, you are a soul, a whole being, so free in your actions, so priceless in your worth that God Himself, in the guise of the second person of the Trinity, came into the world to be crucified for you. How ridiculous to you the poet's curse seems. He believed so much in heaven that he needed to have a chorus of children to hide behind as a shield. Do you not believe in the all powerful nature of matter? The earth is finite. We can destroy matter in minutes through fission and achieve oblivion if we do not recognize the presence of God. The absolute claims of materialism are supported on a limited premise. You will see that the attributes of matter are purely spiritual notions, such as infinity, eternity, and self creation. To deny the existence of heaven is to deny all existence which does not fall into the orbit of my feelings. It means that I admit for those moments when I close my eyes or block my ears, the world becomes non existent. And now I want to recite to you the most beautiful poem ever written about heaven and earth. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. John 1 1 through 5. How can darkness confine light, or matter confine the spirit, or atheism destroy faith and constrain freedom? The heavens number you one by one, for each of you is a unique, irrepeatable creation, man. So since I'm somehow out of the algorithm here, I'm going to go ahead and do another live now, but I'm going to do it from my phone because somehow I think it's being suppressed or something weird's going on. So let's see if more people see this next one. I'm going to be on another live, so hop on my channel. It'll be up just in a minute.